In this video, we'll be looking at the process for making corrections in the case where a line on an invoice or payslip has an incorrect amount. So this could be where an expense has been incorrectly entered against an event, or perhaps the wrong contract was selected for the service user. Many of the things I'll be covering in this video are not brand new, but we have done some tidying up in this area recently, and there is one new option that I will be introducing later. For the purposes of this demonstration, I will focus on a single event. Here we have a 30-minute care event for Arthur Aldridge. The current charge calculation for Arthur produces a value of just shy of £31. Of that, £14.50 is the charge for the event itself, and there is a £16.45 shopping expense that has been entered here. If I click on the link for the event charged, I can see a breakdown for that amount, and here I see that Arthur is being charged for 60 worker minutes. On the basis that this is a 30-minute event, that tells me it must, of course, be a double up. Let's take a look at the Caregivers tab. Here we see that the assigned workers are Will and David. Will's pay amount for this event is $3.90. He was the worker who incurred the $16.45 shopping expense, so an equivalent expense has been added below his name to reimburse him for that. David has no expenses, however his pay amount is rather higher than Will's. If I click on the link here, we see that is due to a senior uplift. So let's assume for now that all of these details are correct and that this event is ready to be invoiced and paid. We'll run those two processes now, and because this event occurred some time ago, it should be picked up by the default selection criteria and should therefore appear on one of the newly generated invoices for Arthur and two of the newly generated payslips for Will and for David. Invoicing and payroll are run by visiting the relevant organization. In this case, that is Northern Area. I have Northern Area organization already open in another tab, so it's simply now a case for me to select organization and generate invoices. I am provided with a number of selection criteria, enabling me to pinpoint precisely which events I wish to include on this invoice run. I'm going to use the default criteria. I am presented now with a message just letting me know that invoicing is a background process and that I will receive an email when it has completed. Let's do the same for payroll, again using the default criteria. These processes will happen fairly instantaneously, so let's go back now to our event and refresh to see the effect here. Let's look on the Service Users tab first of all, and the principal change that we see here is the appearance of a transaction. So this transaction is the link between this event and the line on the invoice where Arthur has been charged for this event. So in this case, that is invoice number 1011, dated today, and the gross amount for that invoice is exactly the same as the charge for this particular event. That tells us, of course, that this is the only event appearing on that invoice. If there had been other events in Arthur's calendar that satisfied the selection criteria for invoicing and that hadn't already been invoiced, they would have been included on that invoice as well. So in this case, though, there was just our one event. Let's take a look at the invoice. We see that Arthur is a self-funding service user. We see the total invoice amount, the amount of that, which is expenses, and we can confirm indeed that this is the only event on the invoice. On the pay side, we also have transactions for Will and for David. This transaction is the link between this event and the line on Will's payslip where this event has been paid. That is payslip number 10011. David's payslip 10013. In the case of Will's payslip, we see the gross amount is significantly higher than the cost for this individual event. So in that case, there were more than just one event ready to be paid. Let's take a look at the payslip quickly and we'll see indeed that there are 3 events, a number of expenses and a number of travel expenses as well. So this event has now been paid and invoiced. As well as the transactions appearing as evidence of that, there is another change that the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed, which is that we are no longer able to adjust or add expenses to this event. If I attempt to hover the mouse here, you see that any adjustments to those fields are prevented, and there is no add button or remove button for adding or removing expenses. The system will prevent me from making a change to an event if that change would cause the cost to vary from the amount already paid or the charge to vary from the amount already invoiced. Of course, any changes to the expenses are guaranteed to break that rule, and that is why the interface is preventing me from making any such changes. Any other changes that would violate that rule will also be prevented. So, for example, if I was to go back to the scheduling tab and rather arbitrarily add some additional minutes to the event duration, when I attempt to save that, I will be prevented from doing so. This error message informs me that the additional minutes cause the event charge to increase by £7.25 more than the amount that Arthur was invoiced on invoice 1011. That is not allowed, and therefore that change cannot be saved. So what will I need to do then if I really need to make a change to this event that will cause the charge to vary from the amount that has been invoiced or the cost to vary from the amount that has been paid? The answer is that I need to credit the transactions before making those changes. So if I want to make a change to the event that will adjust the cost for Will, I need to credit that transaction. And if I want to make a change to this event that will adjust the charge for Arthur, I first need to credit this transaction. Now, Plait provides two methods for crediting transactions. The first is to credit the entire document on which the transaction appears. So that is to say, to credit the entire invoice 1011, credit the entire payslip 10011. So let's do that first. Let's go back to the invoice and use the context menu to select credit. I am told that all events have been marked to be credited. The next invoice run will include the credit items. So that is to say, by choosing that option, I have not instantaneously caused a credit note to be generated. All I have done is flagged all of the lines on that invoice as requiring a credit, and the next time invoicing is performed, the relevant credit lines will be added to the relevant new invoice. Let's do the same for Will's payslip. Again, choosing credit from the context menu. This will have put a flag against these three events, or the transactions on these three events, saying that they need to be credited. And the next time payroll is run, the corresponding credit lines will be generated and added to a new payslip for Will. Going back to the event, we see the effect of this is that we now have this message flagged for credit appearing against the transactions, both for Arthur and for Will. We don't see anything here because we have not touched the payslip for David. So now these transactions have been flagged for credit, I am now once again able to make changes to the event that will cause the cost to vary from the paid amount or the charge to vary from the invoiced amount. So I am now able to adjust the expenses here and here. What I'm not going to be able to do, however, is make any changes to this event which will vary the cost for David, because I have not yet credited this transaction here, and therefore David's part of this event is still locked. Let's prove that by going back to the scheduling tab once again, and again attempting to change the duration of this event. If I do that, we will receive an error message that is similar to the one that we saw before. Previously, the error message told me that the change was invalid because it would cause the charge for Arthur to vary from the amount that he had been invoiced. That's no longer a problem because we have marked for credit the transaction for Arthur, we are allowed to make a change that will vary the charge for him. However, because we've not marked David's transaction for credit, we have got the error message telling us that that change of duration will cause the pay amount for David to increase by $295 from the amount that he has been paid on the payslip mentioned here, and that is still invalid, and therefore this change is still not allowed. Let's do now another invoice and payroll run. So let's imagine, for argument's sake, that 7 days have passed and we're doing invoicing and payroll again. We'll go back to the Northern Area Organization, select Generate Invoices, and again use the default criteria. As I mentioned earlier, this will invoice and pay any new events that are satisfying the criteria, as well as including lines for the credited items from the previous invoice and pay run. Let's refresh our event again and see the effect of doing that. And now we see that the transaction for Arthur has got reference to a new invoice where the invoice line from 1011 has now been credited, and that is on a new invoice 1012. If we take a look at that, we'll see here that we have got the inverse of what was previously invoiced, so minus 1450 for the event charge and minus 1645 for the expense charge. Similarly, on the care worker side, we have got reference to a new pay advice where the line on this pay advice for this event has now been credited. Indeed, all of the other lines were also marked for credit, and therefore the entire document has been credited. So where previously the payslip was for a value of $398.69, this payslip is now for a value of minus $398.69. Because we have now flagged these transactions for credit and indeed generated those credits, we are able to adjust the expenses as I previously mentioned. So let's add now an additional pound to the expense here. You'll notice when I do that the event charge now is shown as consisting of two values. First of all, we have the value that has been most recently invoiced. That's the 3095 number. We also now see that there is a new charge calculated for this event, which is £1 more. So we've added £1 here, and that explains the difference between these two amounts. So this is quite clearly showing us the effect of adjusting that expense after this event has been invoiced. Let's do the same on the other side here, and a similar effect will be seen here with the current amount being £1 greater than the amount most recently paid. But because we have credited these transactions, that is a perfectly valid thing, and we will be able to save that. Let's see then what happens when we run invoicing and payroll for a third time. So perhaps now another week has passed and we are ready to issue new invoice and payslip for this event. So we'll go back to the organization for a final time, choose Generate Invoices, again using the default criteria, and the same for payroll. And when we refresh the event now, we'll see that for Arthur, there is a new transaction which is linking this event to the new invoice on which it has been charged, and the charge will be £1 more than it was on the previous invoice. And on the care worker side, exactly the same, another transaction here linking this event to a new payslip, 10015, where Will is now being paid an additional £1, which is the additional £1 that we added to the expense. You'll notice that I am once again unable to modify the expense here. That is because the last, or rather the most recent transaction is not flagged for credit, and therefore this is locked. If we go back to the credit note or the pay advice with where we credited all of the lines from the original pay advice, we see once again that there is a lot of information here. There's a lot of values that are being credited. All we really wanted to do was credit the 1645. All we wanted was to make a change to that one value. So crediting everything else and then repaying the same amounts may seem to be rather a lot to be doing for just that £1 that we needed to adjust here. For those organizations that would like the flexibility to credit individual lines on an invoice or payslip rather than being forced to credit the entire document, an option is now provided to do this. So if we want to activate that option, we need to go to our own organization, that is Demo Care in our case, and we need to visit the Invoicing and Payroll tab and tick the Allow Individual Booking Credits option. Having done that, we'll go back to the event and see now that there is a Credit Assignees option in that menu. And when I select that option, I am now provided with the ability to tick which of the event assignees I want to credit for just this event. Let's say that I want to credit them all. Doing that, I now see that the most recent transaction for Arthur, for Will, and for David is flagged for credit. And this is the first time since this event was originally invoiced where the event is fully unlocked. Because I have credited or flagged for credit the most recent transaction for all of the assignees, I am now able to make changes to this event. Whatever changes I need, it doesn't matter whether it affects the cost for either of the care workers or the charge for the client, all such changes will be allowed. So if I was to go back to the scheduling tab, I am now finally able to make that change that I have previously been prevented from making. I can add additional minutes to the event and that will be allowed. If I go back to the service users tab now, I can see the effect of increasing the event duration is that I have a most recently invoiced amount of £31.95 and a current amount of rather more than £7 extra. And on the caregiver side, I can see that the pay amount for Will has increased by a rather smaller amount as it also has for David.